They say losing everything happens slowly, but for me it felt like one long, violent second. My name, well, the name I was born with was Emily Carter. Small town, upstate New York, a place where everyone knew your dog's name. And your father's reputation. My dad, Thomas Carter, owned a little auto shop on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just 4 bays, a rusty Coke machine, and a reputation built over 30 years of honest work. He wasn't rich, but he was respected, trusted, the kind of man who'd fix your car at midnight if you were stranded. I was the daughter with grease under her fingernails and ambition in her bones. He always said one day the place would be mine. He had no idea what was coming. It started like most disasters do, with a handshake. A man in a Mercedes pulled into our gravel lot. Designer suit, shiny watch, a smile that had too many teeth. Said his name was Logan Brandt. Said he was looking to invest in local businesses with growth potential. My dad? He lit up like Christmas morning. He always wanted more from me for the shop. For our name. He talked about partnerships, expansion, modernizing the business. We should have known better. But when you've spent your life struggling, a lifeline looks an awful lot like salvation. The contracts came fast. Logan promised he'd handle the city licenses, the suppliers, the payroll. Lawyers we couldn't afford said it all looked standard. In return, we gave up 49% of the company. Only it wasn't really 49, not when every clause worked in his favor. At first, business boomed. New lifts, LED signs, ads on the radio. For a while, we believed it was the start of something big, until it wasn't. Things started going wrong quietly. Accounts were drained for expenses we didn't recognize. And then one afternoon, I walked into the office and saw our shop's ownership paperwork. Changed, my dad's name quietly removed. Checks bounced, tax notices piled up. It was all legal. All signed. We didn't understand the loopholes until it was too late. And then the government showed up. Not with medals for honest work, but with handcuffs. Logan had set up a fake vendor account. Used our company to launder money through fake invoices, fast. He disappeared before they even finished the investigation. But my father? He got the blame. They called him a fraud, a criminal, a thief. I watched the man who raised me, who taught me that your name was everything, get dragged into a courtroom wearing a suit he hadn't worn since my graduation. They called it justice. I called it erasure. The town turned. People who once brought us pies and Christmas cards started crossing the street when they saw us. We lost the house, the shop, the name, and my father. He stopped being my father that year. He barely spoke. The fire went out in his eyes. He sat on the back porch every morning like he was waiting for time to undo it all. But time only moves forward, me? I couldn't wait for someone to rescue us. So I left. I took the last of our savings and a name that didn't belong to me anymore. I became Jordan Blake, a name I pulled from a coffee cup and a magazine ad. I enrolled in online classes. Got a job in a hotel cleaning rooms by day and studying accounting by night. I wasn't running. I was preparing. Because I didn't just want to move on. I wanted to rebuild. Stronger, smarter, sharper, and I wanted him to see it. Logan Brandt, the man who turned my life into ash and never looked back. So I started tracking him. Business journals, legal loopholes. Holding companies, shell corporations. He was everywhere and nowhere. But eventually, I found something his son, Ryan Brandt, freshly appointed VP at his father's firm, Ivy League smile, Instagram perfect life, and I realized there was my opening. This wasn't about falling in love. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about making the Brandts feel the fire they lit in me. But I knew better than to rush. Revenge, if done right, is slow. It's methodical, and it starts with silence. That was the day I let Emily Carter die. And the day Jordan Blake began her war. You don't just vanish overnight. Disappearing, truly disappearing, takes work, patience, discipline, and a very cold kind of rage. I didn't go off the grid with guns or some flashy plan. I went off with library cards. With burner phones, spreadsheets, online classes no one knew I was enrolled in. I erased Emily Carter, not all at once, but piece by piece. First, the name. Then the old photos. Then the friends who didn't really check in after my father's arrest. And when there was nothing left to remind the world who I used to be, I built someone new. Jordan Blake was born on a cheap laptop in a rented basement room in Jersey City. She didn't have a past, just a list of objectives. She worked 3 jobs, got 2 fake IDs, and spent every waking minute becoming a ghost inside the system that once chewed her family up and spit them out. Jordan didn't laugh much. She didn't share secrets. She didn't take a break. She took notes. On corporations. On how shell companies move money without leaving fingerprints. On how people like Logan Brandt never pay the price, they delegate the fall to someone else. There were nights I stared at my ceiling, the hum of the city loud outside my window, and wondered if I was becoming a monster just to catch one. But then I do remember the look in my father's eyes the day he signed that contract. That flicker of hope before it turned into ashes. And I'd sharpen myself again, because justice isn't given. It's taken. I started small temp jobs at banks, office admin work, anything that gave me access to internal systems. I listened more than I spoke. Learned how executives talk, how assistants cover for them, and how careless the rich become when they think you don't matter. Invisibility is a weapon one they train into girls like me without realizing it. Be small, be polite, don't cause waves. So I didn't cause waves. I became the tide. Every document I scanned, every signature I forged brought me closer. Not to Logan, but to his son, Ryan Brandt, the pretty poster boy. The future of the company, the one mistake Logan hadn't calculated. Ryan liked attention. He was always on panels, podcasts, press conferences. And what do men like Ryan do when they see a smart, ambitious, slightly mysterious woman in the front row asking the right questions? They invite her in. He didn't know who I was. Of course he didn't. He just knew I was Jordan Blake, MBA candidate, finance nerd. Quietly impressive. So when he offered me an internship at Brandt Holdings, I didn't flinch. I smiled because that was the moment the plan changed from theory to execution. Brandt Holdings wasn't just a company, it was a fortress. A labyrinth of accounts, subsidiaries, donation fronts, and buried secrets so deep you'd need a map, a torch, and a shovel to find the truth. But that's the thing, I'd spent 4 years drawing that map. And now, I had a key. I kept my head down, wore the right heels, asked the right questions, said the right things in meetings, gave me access to files that were confidential but not classified, and slowly the doors opened. Ryan let me shadow him, introduced me to his team. He trusted me, which meant he was either very dumb or just like his father. I still wasn't sure which scared me more. But here's what I did know, he had no idea who I was, not directly. No clue that the girl sitting 2 feet from him had once watched her father be led away in cuffs while his father toasted champagne. The fun part? I didn't have to hurt Ryan. All I had to do was take everything from him. Just like they did to us. Internal memos with just enough detail to look legal if you didn't know what to look for. I started collecting pieces, invoices with ghost vendors, executive travel logs that didn't match the accounting. I knew. I cross-checked them, cross-referenced vendors, traced payments to companies that didn't exist 3 years ago. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. Logan Brandt had built an empire on paper lies, and his son? He was walking straight into the same fire. But I wasn't going to blow the whistle. No, I wanted something slower. Something more permanent. I wasn't interested in headlines. I wanted a legacy, so I did what no one expected me to do. I got closer. There's something strange about working inside the machine that destroyed your life. It's like walking through the ruins of your childhood, except the walls are covered in glass. And everyone's pretending they can't hear the ticking underneath. That's what Brandt Holdings was. A skyscraper with a view of the city in blood under its foundation. And me? I was the ghost in the elevator. No one knew I'd been here before, not physically, but in all the ways that mattered. This wasn't just some job. This was sacred ground. The place where my family's name was erased. And I was back to rewrite it. The first thing I learned, the higher the floors, the colder the smiles. Brandt Holdings had floors like levels of power. HR on 3, finance on 12, strategy on 21, and the Brandts? Where the coffee was always fresh and the secrets were always deeper. They lived on 33. That was the floor you didn't walk onto without an invite, but getting there wasn't about promotions. It was about proximity. And Ryan Brandt, the golden son, was my passcode. Ryan was charming in that dangerous way. Not cruel. Just careless. He liked smart women who didn't challenge him too hard. Pretty, polished, efficient. I became all 3. He called me grounded. Double quotes said I had vision. I let him talk. I watched his eyes when budgets were mentioned and how he flinched every time someone brought up compliance. Meanwhile, I listened. I noticed who he avoided in meetings. I saw who handled the real decisions. He had no idea I wasn't there to climb. I was there to undermine. Silent partnerships with shell companies based in places no one could pronounce without a VPN. The deeper I went, the more rotten it got. They weren't just bending the law, they were shaping it. Donations to politicians, gifts to regulatory advisors. It was all there, hidden beneath flowcharts and family foundations. The girl who never complained, never asked for more. And yet, they moved with confidence. Because people like the Brants don't believe they can fall. They think they own gravity. I created a routine. During the day, I worked like a dream employee, on time, respectful, productive. At night, I transformed. Buried in a folder labeled internal, discontinued. 2 burner laptops, 3 hard drives. A web of passwords I cracked from watching Ryan type with too much confidence. Every coffee order, every meeting note, every invoice. The insurance payout, however, was real. I backed it up, encrypted it. Stored it offshore. There was one file. It wasn't discontinued. It was a cover-up. A shipping deal gone wrong. One of their subsidiaries moved agriculture supplies out of port in Baltimore. But the manifest was blank. $12 million gone, hidden, and my father's name listed in a footnote as the fake third-party consultant. That's when the air left my lungs. That wasn't just manipulation, that was framing. They hadn't just used us. They built their fraud on our name. On his name, and that's when something changed in me. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was focused. Because now I didn't just want justice. I took to a regulator about some oddities in their tax filings. A fake investor profile requesting internal documentation. I wanted the world to see them for what they really were, not innovators, not leaders, just thieves in better suits. I began moving the pieces. An anonymous report to a journalist, just a breadcrumb. Each move tiny, but together, they made the ground beneath Brant Holdings a little less stable. And Ryan, he was starting to notice. He called me into his office one Friday afternoon, told me he trusted me, said I was different from the others, that I saw the big picture. I smiled, nodded, and asked if I could help more. Because the closer I got to him, the closer I got to Logan Brant, the man himself. And I wasn't leaving this place until he saw me, not just as a new intern, but as the daughter of the man he ruined. Sometimes the past doesn't whisper. It doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it just walks straight through the door wearing a name tag and carrying a briefcase. That's how it happened. I was 2 months into the internship, deep inside Brant Holdings. Filing, gathering, listening, recording closer than ever to the truth. So close I could taste it. Then the past showed up. And her name was Lori Evans. Lori had once been my father's bookkeeper. The kind older woman with a soft voice and nervous hands. She used to bring donuts to the shop on Saturdays. The one who stayed after hours to help him balance the numbers when things got tight. I hadn't seen her since the arrest. Didn't even know she was still alive. But there she was walking through the glass doors of Brant Holdings as if she belonged there. Her name printed on the visitor log. Her ID scanned at reception. Consultant. Compliance division. That's when the floor fell out beneath me. I watched her from the corner of the elevator, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? Jordan Blake had perfect posture, tailored blazers, flawless American accent. Emily Carter had oil on her jeans and grief in her eyes. Still, I watched every twitch of Lori's face. Every glance, and I couldn't help but ask, what was she doing here? Was she part of it? Was she working with Logan Brant now? Or had she just survived? Back in my apartment that night, I tore through every document I had. Pulled up old court records, bank statements, emails I'd saved from years ago, and there it was, buried deep. A memo dated 6 weeks before my father's arrest. Signed by Elevens, she had flagged an unusual transfer in the books. She'd warned them. She tried to stop it. Then, she disappeared from the company records, let go quietly, silenced, just like us, nervous air. So why was she back? That answer came the next morning, a mandatory team meeting. Small conference room, bright lights, crisp suit. Watch worth more than most people's homes. Smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. And then Logan Brandt walked in. Yes, him. The ghost. The architect of everything. The man who'd built an empire on lies and walked away clean. He still looked like a man who thought the world owed him a thank you card. He stood at the front of the room and said one word that made my entire body go cold. Audit? Apparently some anomalies had shown up in last quarter's filings. Nothing serious, of course. Just a precautionary deep dive. That's when Lori was introduced. She wasn't a consultant. She was the lead. And every single person in that building began to wonder what exactly had been buried beneath the marble floors of Brandt Holdings' internal affairs. And just like that, the walls started shaking. Over the next few days, tension crackled through the office like a live wire. Desks were cleared, drives were backed up. Passwords were changed. People started whispering in the hallways. But I didn't panic. I watched, because this was opportunity disguised as chaos. If they were pulling up old records, that meant the 2016 cover-up I'd uncovered might finally surface on their terms. And if Lori Evans still had a conscience, she could become the most dangerous ally I never asked for. I stayed late that week. Not to get ahead, but to plant seeds. I accidentally left a flash drive in Lori's review folder, labeled Carter Case, Vendor Chain Analysis. Inside, a breadcrumb trail, not the full puzzle, just enough to make her curious. Enough to make her doubt the Brandts again. And then I waited. 2 days later, I found a sticky note in my drawer. No name. No signature. Just one sentence scribbled in rushed, shaking handwriting. You're not the only one who remembers. That night, I cried for the first time in years, not out of weakness, but because I realized I wasn't alone. I'd spent so long becoming a ghost, so long building this war by myself, that I forgot what it felt like to have a second heartbeat in the fight. Lori hadn't betrayed us. She'd been silenced, buried, just like my father. And now? Now she was back. What comes next won't be easy. Because you don't bring down titans with one swing. You do it piece by piece. But this was different now, because the past wasn't chasing me anymore. It was standing beside me. There's something about an old ledger, the weight of it, the faded ink, the quiet authority of truth pressed between its yellowing pages. My father used to say, the numbers never lie, people do. At the time, I thought it was just another thing dads say. Now I know it was a warning, and the proof of that warning was sitting in Lori Evans' hands. We met in silence. No code words, no elaborate plan. Just a shared nod at the end of a long hallway where the security cameras didn't reach and the coffee machine whined too loud for anyone to eavesdrop. She handed me a black notebook, leather-bound, no label, no markings. This, she whispered, was never supposed to exist. It was a ledger. But not the kind Brandt Holdings submitted to the IRS or the board. This was the real one. The one Lori had kept in secret out of fear, out of instinct, out of guilt. A personal archive of every transaction, every discrepancy, every time Logan Brandt had used our family's shop to move dirty money. My father's name was in there, dozens of times, not as a partner, as a victim. I ran my fingers over the entries. There were notes in her handwriting. Carter unaware. Logan override. Fabricated signature verify initials. Lori had seen it happening, piece by piece. She tried to flag it. But when the numbers got too close to the truth, her contract was terminated and she disappeared from Brandt Holdings like she'd never existed. Now, almost a decade later, the very thing they forced her to hide ... could burn them to the ground. We met 3 more times that week. Each time in a different spot, each time more cautious. She brought flash drives, old backup logs, scanned files she'd smuggled home over the years. And I brought everything I gathered from the inside names, IP addresses, current board dealings. We were building a war room, one whisper at a time. But as the puzzle came together, so did the danger. Brandt Holdings wasn't just a company anymore, it was a fortress under siege, and the guards were tightening their grip. People started disappearing from Slack, from team meetings, from the building entirely. The audit had turned serious. External regulators were sniffing around. Legal began scrubbing files. And Logan? He was back. Not just as a CEO, but as a predator sensing blood in the air. I remember the day he walked past my desk. He paused. Looked right at me, his eyes cold, calculating. Not confused, not angry. Just curious. Like he caught a flicker of something he didn't recognize. A crack in the mask. "Jordan, isn't it?" he said. "Yes, sir," I replied, steady. "Good work lately." "Keep your head down, you'll go far." I nodded, smiled, and in that moment I knew he suspected nothing. Which meant I had one final window, one last chance before the hammer came down. We set up an anonymous drop to 3 outlets, a business journal, a whistleblower law firm, and a federal investigator I'd found 6 months earlier who owed no favors to anyone. Lori and I made our move. She prepared a sealed file, a complete ledger of Brandt's illicit transactions, cross-referenced against my digital evidence. We timed it down to the minute. Friday, 9 a.m. right before the quarterly earnings core, but the night before the drop. Lori didn't show up to our meeting. I waited 20 minutes. Then an hour. Called the burner, no answer. I went home, heart racing, brain spiraling. And there, in front of my apartment door, was her notebook. The ledger, wrapped in a plastic bag. With a sticky note taped to the front. They know. Finish it, I never saw Lori again. Her apartment? Empty. No signs of struggle. No sign of her at all. Brandt had erased her again, only this time I was ready. The next morning, I walked into Brandt Holdings like it was any other day. But my laptop was already uploading everything to the cloud. The drop hit, and the fallout started instantly. Some storms don't come with thunder. Some come with silence. Emails that bounce. Phones that don't ring. The strange hush that settles in an office when no one knows who's safe anymore. That's what Monday morning felt like. It wasn't chaos, not yet. It was the moment before the glass shatters. The collective breath everyone holds before it all goes to hell. And I knew. It had started. I took the elevator up to floor 21 like always. Coffee in hand, calm on my face. But inside, every cell in my body was vibrating, because that morning 3 files went live. 1 to a financial crimes task force in DC, 1 to an investigative journalist in Boston. And 1 just for fun to Logan Brandt's personal lawyer. Inside those files? 10 years of ledger entries, vendor fraud, shell companies, laundering pipelines. And the ledger Lori Evans gave her life to protect. Everything, every name, every number, out in the wild. By 9:13 and the first ripple hit, Slack channels locked. Admins typing rapid fire. Phones lighting up across departments. I walked past the executive conference room and saw Logan on the phone, jaw tight, pacing, finger stabbing at some invisible enemy. Ryan stood by the window, frozen, pale as glass. They knew. An internal memo went out by 9:30. Temporary system outage for routine maintenance. Yeah, right. By 10:15, legal was sequestered behind closed doors. By 11 o'clock, the first news alert hit my phone. Breaking, Brandt Holdings under federal investigation for financial misconduct. Beneath the headline, a familiar quote. Accountability is coming. And it started with a ledger. Anonymous source, I smiled. Just a little. But victory wasn't what I expected. It didn't feel like justice. It felt heavy, like standing on top of a building after setting the foundation on fire. You can't walk away untouched. You just pray the burn was worth it. By lunch, the building was on lockdown, keycards revoked, emails suspended, security guards stationed at every stairwell. The intern program? On pause. Staff? Encouraged to work remotely. And me, I stayed? I had to see it through. I went into the break room and found Ryan alone, staring at the TV on mute. The news headlines scrolling like a funeral crawl. He looked broken, not guilty, not enraged, just stunned. Did you know? He asked me quietly. I looked at him. Measured my answer. No, I said, but I guess someone did. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I didn't expect. They're going to bury whoever did this. You know that, right? And for the first time I saw it, he wasn't angry because someone exposed the lie. He was angry because the lie mattered. Because it meant the empire his father built wasn't real. By 3 p.m., my badge stopped working. I stood at the elevator, swiped again. Red light. Access denied. You've been placed on temporary leave. Security approached. Miss Blake, one said, too politely. I nodded, walked out slowly. And when the glass doors closed behind me, I exhaled for the first time in 5 years. But this story wasn't over, not even close. That night, my inbox exploded. The journalist I tipped off? He wanted a statement. The investigator? She wanted to talk. Quiet insiders who had all seen the cracks. but never knew how deep they ran. And then came the anonymous emails, dozens of them. From former employees, vendors. I saw fake signatures too. We were told never to ask about those accounts. I knew Lori. She was the only one who cared. And one message, simple, unsigned, chilling. You're not safe. I stared at that last one for a long time. Because it didn't scare me. It confirmed something I already knew. The fall of Brant Holdings is going to be messy. And no one takes down an empire without making enemies. But here's the thing, I wasn't hiding anymore. They could dig. They could threaten. They could run PR campaigns and file lawsuits. But they couldn't bury the truth, not this time. Because I had learned something they never understood. Empires don't fall when the truth is shouted. They fall when the people inside start whispering it to each other. And now? Everyone was whispering. They never tell you about the cost, not in the movies, not in the headlines, not in the speeches about doing the right thing. No one ever warns you that when you go after giants, the people who bleed first aren't the giants. They're the ones standing too close when the giant begins to fall. And that's what this chapter of the story became. Not justice, not revenge. Just collateral damage. 3 days after the files went public, a woman named Susan Bell was fired. She'd worked in Brant Holdings' procurement department for 8 years, single mother, 2 kids. She once brought cupcakes to the office for everyone's birthdays. Her name had been used on 3 fake contracts she never signed, but that appeared in the leaked documents. That was enough. No investigation. No meeting. Just an escorted walk out the front door. Then came the others. A junior analyst who flagged discrepancies last year gone. A compliance intern who asked too many questions during onboarding suspended. People who had no idea what Brant was hiding. People like my father 10 years ago. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at a wall of sticky notes and file folders, and I asked myself something I hadn't dared ask in years. Was I becoming the very thing I was fighting? Because I didn't want Susan Bell to lose her job. I didn't want interns to get fired. I wanted accountability, real, targeted, earned, but the system? It doesn't fall neatly. It collapses in all directions. And sometimes it lands on the wrong people. I reached out to Susan anonymously. Told her to check her severance contract twice. Told her she could fight it and that she had support. Then I sent a different email, one with a burner address. To Ryan Brant, I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. 2 hours later, a one-line message. This is bigger than you think. They're not done. That's when it hit me. The empire wasn't collapsing. It was reorganizing, and Logan Brant wasn't running. He was regrouping. By the end of the week, a law firm released a statement claiming the leaked documents were fabricated, illegally obtained, and politically motivated. Brant Holdings called it a coordinated smear campaign by bad actors. They threatened lawsuits. They launched counter-narratives. And suddenly, I wasn't a whistleblower. I was an unstable former employee with a vendetta. They tried to smear Lori too. Released a statement suggesting she had a history of erratic professional behavior, that she acted alone, that her evidence was incomplete and inconsistent. She wasn't here to defend herself. And I knew they counted on that, so I did something dangerous. I made a call to the same journalist I tipped off weeks before. And I told him everything. Not just the facts. The story, about Emily Carter, about my father, about Lori, about the ledger. I told him who I was, what I'd seen, what I'd done. I don't care if you use my name, I said. I just care that people know the truth. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then the reporter said, Jordan, you know they're going to come after you for this, right? I exhaled. They already have. The article went live 3 days later, front page. Headline in bold. Inside the fall, whistleblower speaks out against Brant Holdings corruption. They used my photo. They told the whole story, and suddenly, the story wasn't about Brant. It was about me. The internet lit up. Some people called me brave. Others called me delusional. From kids whose parents had worked for Brant. From people who'd been burned by corporations too powerful to touch. I got messages from whistleblowers in other industries, and one email. No subject line, no name, just 4 words. You made him bleed. I stared at it for a long time. Because I knew exactly who him was, Logan Brant. But bleeding isn't the same as falling. Calculating. And he hadn't fallen yet. He was watching. And now, he knew my name, which meant the next move would be his. And I had to be ready. You ever hear people say power corrupts? They're wrong. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. It strips away the niceties, the carefully rehearsed smiles, the philanthropic foundations, and polished boardroom ethics. And what's left behind is the monster. This chapter isn't about what Logan Brandt did. It's about who he really is. And the moment I came face to face with the darkness behind the curtain, after the article dropped, I went quiet, publicly at least. I didn't post. I didn't give interviews. I didn't reply to the avalanche of messages. I stayed out of sight because I knew the counterattack would come. Not with lawsuits or press conferences, not at first. No, guys like Logan Brandt don't fight in public. They operate in the shadows. And soon enough, the shadows found me. It started with a friend request, a fake name, no mutuals. No profile picture, then came the text, at first random. Then specific. We know what you did, Jordan. Hope your proud innocent people are paying for your stunt. You should be careful walking home alone. I reported everything. But deep down, I knew reporting didn't stop people like Logan, because these weren't just scare tactics. They were distractions, and they worked until I got the tip. A former brand accountant reached out. A quiet man named Ely. He said he had something. We met in an underground parking garage because apparently that's what my life had become now. He handed me a flash drive, no pleasantries, no stories. Just 3 words. You need to see this. The files were time-stamped over a decade. Audio recordings. Hidden phone taps, memos, conversations between Logan Brandt and legal, Logan and political lobbyists, Logan and law enforcement. He hadn't just bent the system. He owned parts of it. He donated to state prosecutors, funded campaigns, sat on advisory boards of ethics panels. And the worst? There was a recording. My father, being told to sign off on a falsified vendor deal. He refused. The next audio clip? Logan's voice, calm, cold, calculated. Then we'll have to make Carter disappear the hard way. I dropped the headphones. I'd been chasing shadows, pieces, paper trails. But this wasn't just corruption. It was a murder in slow motion. A man with enough money and influence to destroy a life because it inconvenienced his bottom line. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about me anymore. This was bigger than revenge, bigger than redemption. This was about stopping a monster before he devoured someone else. I leaked the tapes, but this time I did it anonymously. 3 national outlets, 1 independent whistleblower org. I made sure they all dropped at once. Within 24 hours, the Department of Justice opened a federal inquiry. And this time, Logan Brandt couldn't control the narrative. Because the voice on those recordings wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. That night, my apartment was broken into. They didn't take anything, just moved things. A picture frame turned backward, the closet door left open. My father's old wristwatch placed in the center of the kitchen table, a message. They knew. They were in. And now they were done being subtle. I checked into a motel on the outskirts of town. Burner phone, offline laptop. Everything encrypted. And as I sat there alone in the dark, I asked myself, what does it cost to win a war you never asked for? Because I had names, files, truth, but Logan Brandt had reach, resources, rage, and a legacy to protect. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to end him. Not with noise. With proof, with pressure. And with the one thing no empire can survive, exposure from the inside. There's a sound I'll never forget. It isn't a scream, or an explosion, or even a confession. It's the sound of silence. Breaking, that moment when the lie finally collapses under the weight of too much truth. When people stop whispering and start talking. When one voice becomes dozens, hundreds. That's what Chapter 9 became. Not the end of a conspiracy, but the beginning of a reckoning. It started with the second drop. The tapes were just the first spark. This time I released the documents. Bribery logs. Executive expense reports used to fund campaign contributions and offshore transfers. Internal HR memos. And one file that changed everything. A non-disclosure agreement between Brandt Holdings and a whistleblower who had mysteriously vanished in 2017. The signature? Faked. The dates? Tampered, that file proved something no PR firm, no lawyer, no money could undo. That Brandt Holdings knew. They didn't just make a mistake. They built a machine designed to crush anyone who stood in the way. By Monday morning, the media storm had a name, the Brandt Files. Every major network ran the story. Journalists who'd ignored me before were now scrambling for quotes. Congressmen were calling for hearings. Regulators demanded subpoenas. And Logan Brandt? He'd vanished from public view. No statements, no denials, silence, just ... and that silence was starting to sound a lot like guilt. Junior analysts, assistants, delivery drivers, custodians. Then the emails started pouring in. Former interns, people who'd worked at Brandt Holdings and left with scars. Some had seen things. Others had experienced things, abuse, coercion, manipulation. One email hit me hardest. But now you've proved that a lie can't outrun the truth forever. Thank you. It read, they said if I talked, no one would believe me. That Brandt was untouchable. I read it 5 times. Then I cried. I wasn't the only voice in the dark, not out of sadness. Out of release. Because for the first time in 10 years. But Logan wasn't done. You can't put it back in the box, no. He launched a counter-campaign. Paid influencers to discredit me, leaked a fake arrest record from my past, accused me of emotional instability and revenge-driven defamation. He even hinted that I had ties to extremist groups, whatever that meant. Classic misdirection. Try to make the whistleblower the villain. But the thing about truth, once it's out, especially when others start talking too. Lori's files were authenticated. Eli, the accountant, agreed to testify, and then the board turned. 2 Brandt Holdings board members resigned publicly. One released a statement. I was misled. We were all misled. I can no longer serve an institution built on systemic deception. It was happening. The empire wasn't just cracked. It was crumbling, still. I wasn't celebrating. Because I knew something others didn't. This wasn't a clean fall. This wasn't justice descending from the heavens on golden scales. This was warfare, and war is messy. You lose things. You lose people. You lose pieces of yourself. But the silence had broken, and the truth was loud now. I went on record officially. Sat in a federal building across from 2 agents and told them everything. Names, files, passwords, what I saw, what Lori saw. What Logan tried to erase, and when they asked me if I was afraid. I said yes, but I wasn't afraid of Logan Brandt. I was afraid of what happens if people like him keep winning. Later that night, I walked through my old neighborhood, past the closed auto shop, the rusted Carter sign still hanging above the gate. I stood there for a while, just breathing. And I thought about my father, what he lost, what they took from him, and I realized this wasn't just his story anymore. It was ours. Everyone who'd ever been crushed under the weight of power dressed up as professionalism. Everyone who'd ever been told they didn't matter, but they couldn't fight back. Now, we had a voice. Not all revolutions start with fire. Some start with paper. Some start with a whisper. And some start with a girl who changed her name and walked into a lion's den with a secret agenda and a father's ghost on her shoulder. This wasn't about destroying Brandt Holdings anymore. It was about proving something even more dangerous, that the truth can survive anything, even silence. There's something strange that happens when the dust finally settles. You don't feel victorious. You feel ... hollow, like the silence that follows a thunderstorm where everything is still standing but nothing feels the same. That's where this story ends, not in a courtroom, not on a front page, but in the quiet reckoning that follows when ghosts are finally allowed to speak. It took 9 months. 9 months of investigations, hearings, backroom deals, plea bargains, testimonies, and on a rainy Thursday morning in November, Logan Brandt finally walked into federal court flanked by a pair of high-powered attorneys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. His hair was grayer, his eyes sunken, but that smirk, still there. He pled not guilty. Of course he did. Because people like Logan don't admit guilt. They negotiate with it. The prosecution had hundreds of pages of evidence. The audio tapes, the fake ledgers, the whistleblower statements. They painted a picture deliberate, methodical of a man who used money like a weapon and power like a mask. They showed how he buried scandals with payouts, how he moved dirty contracts through clean subsidiaries, how he ruined lives to preserve profits, and in the gallery, we watched, not just me, but Susan Bell, Eli, the interns, the names in the margins, the ones who'd been crushed and cast aside. And every time Logan refused to look up, it felt like victory. Not because we needed his eye contact, but because we knew deep down that we weren't invisible anymore. The verdict came 7 weeks later, guilty. On 6 federal counts, not all, but enough. Enough to send him away. But here's the thing about justice. It doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't reopen my father's shop. It doesn't put Lori Evans back in that hallway. It doesn't fix the broken pieces left behind by the machine he built. Justice is a receipt. A confirmation that yes, this happened. And no, you weren't crazy for screaming into the dark. I stepped outside the courthouse that day and felt the wind shift. No news crews, no applause, just me and silence. But this time it wasn't empty. This time it felt earned. In the weeks that followed, I received letters. Real ones, envelopes, handwritten, no return address. One was from a woman whose husband had lost his pension because of a branch shell company. Another from a young man who said my story helped him walk away from a toxic job. One simply read, "You made the ghost visible. Thank you." I keep that one on my desk, not because I need the reminder, but because I want to remember what this fight was really about. Logan's empire didn't crumble overnight. It fell in waves. Contracts were severed. Brand partnerships vanished. The board resigned one by one. And Brand Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy within the year. The tower they built from deception? Turned out it couldn't survive the weight of truth. I changed my name back. Jordan Carter. It felt right. Not like going back in time, but like reclaiming something I never should have lost. I moved into a small apartment above a bookstore. Started consulting for an investigative nonprofit. Quiet work. Honest work. The kind that reminds you that not all empires are invincible. Sometimes late at night, I still hear my father's voice. Not in words, but in the hum of the machines, the smell of oil on denim, the creak of a rusted sign swinging above an old auto shop. He died thinking the world forgot him. But now? Now his name is part of a story that mattered. I think about Lori too. I wonder where she went, if she made it out. If she ever saw what came of that notebook she left on my doorstep. If she ever knew what kind of fire she started. Lori didn't just uncover a crime. She handed me a torch, and I carried it to the end. This isn't a happy ending. But it is a real one. Because in a world where the powerful silence and the vulnerable disappear, sometimes it takes just one voice to rupture the silence. And once the silence breaks, there's no going back.